Nardwuar, the human serviette, is one of, if not the most iconic interviewer of all time. From his high energy and gift giving to his classic catchphrases and signature sign-offs, Nardwuar is the most lovable interviewer I have ever seen. However, he wasn't always so loved by everyone, and ever since his career began in 1985, he actually faced a lot of hardship because of his unorthodox interview style. He also rarely ever talks about himself, so prior to his YouTube, it's pretty hard to dig up information on his early career. So join me today as we look into the ups and downs of the mysterious rise of Nardwuar. In 1968, John Ruskin, also known as Nardwuar, was born in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. His dad, Vernon Ruskin, was an engineer who wanted his son to follow in his footsteps, but Nardwuar took a bit more after his mother. Nardwuar's mom, Olga Ruskin, was a journalist in the 1950s, then she became a teacher, and then she got into television in the 70s and 80s. She even had her own show at one point. She really loved interviewing and journalism, and a lot of the time she wasn't even being paid. He says that his mom taught him that everyone has a story. He said he used to get teased for his mom being on TV and was embarrassed about it at the time, but now he thinks it's cool. He was actually bullied quite a bit in school, and he mentions it in some interviews and songs, and he says that kids would even throw matches at his hair. He grew up watching Soundproof, which was a punk video show that was very influential to him, and it would continue to influence him to this day. His first interview ever was in 1985 with Art Bergman and Poison after booking them to play at his school. In this interview, you can see how confident he is despite being teased by his classmates. The next year, he went to college at the University of British Columbia and eventually started volunteering at the campus radio station known as CITR. Bill Baker, a friend of Nardwuar, says, at that time he was just like a firecracker or spark plug or something. This unbridled energy that seemed totally unfocused but actually wasn't. The CITR program director was very skeptical that he'd be able to do a show, but after Nardwuar nagged him a million times, he finally let him have a show that was only 1 minute long. So Nardwuar would come on Friday afternoons for 1 minute. Getting him in there for that minute was easy, but getting him out after that minute was not so easy. So the show eventually progressed to be 5 minutes and then 15 minutes and so on. Although Nardwuar himself does say he can't quite remember how long his show was at first. That same year, he changed his name to Nardwuar because he thought it was a neat and silly word. He says, human serviette came out because the cramps had human fly. When I was in the States with some clam chowder dripping down my chin, I asked for serviettes and they didn't know what the hell that was. They only knew napkins, so I became Nardwuar, the human serviette. The same year he became Nardwuar, he also formed his punk rock band, the Evaporators. I listened to a bit of their music and they actually have some decent songs. Nardwuar is the lead vocalist and keyboardist. Because of his mom's connections, he got a summer job working at Shaw Cable 10, but he didn't take it super seriously and was later reassigned to work at Soundproof, which to him was a dream come true because, like I said earlier, he grew up watching them and he was a big fan. When he began interviewing people, he would ask obscure questions, kind of like what soap they use, which was quite irregular, especially at that time. His reasoning behind this is because he says that it's the interviewer's job to make the interviewee interesting. And like we know, most interviews are all kind of the same, asking the same questions, and that's where Nardwuar comes in to change it up. He had been doing his interviews regularly on his college radio station and was known locally for his band and his radio show. He later graduated college with a bachelor's degree in history and continued interviewing on his CITR show, which he's actually stuck with to this day and still does every single Friday. He also released a good bit of music over the years and did shows with his band, and it seemed somewhat successful. There was also an Evaporators side project called The Goblins, where Nardwuar typically would perform wearing a sheet over his head. Nardwuar began doing video interviews rather than audio only in the early 90s. He would put together demo tapes and try to get his own show, sending them to MTV, The Letterman Show, and more. It was hard for Nardwuar to get on TV as many producers didn't like him, with one saying, "He's an irritating weirdo who will never be on this program." His unique approach to interviewing intimidated people that already had a formula that was working and they didn't want to change it up. On top of that, he was extremely enthusiastic, which isn't very normal in the music industry. A lot of people are all about being cool and they don't respect people that are super nerdy about music. For example, in a 1991 interview with Sonic Youth, they're seen breaking a record that Nardwuar gifted them, which is actually one of the only times we've ever seen him angry on camera, and it's really sad to see that they were so disrespectful to him. It always sucks when artists do this to Nardwuar because he really seems like a genuine guy. It may seem weird to a lot of us, but he wasn't always as appreciated and loved as he is now. It was also difficult for him to get certain interviews or opportunities because he was so particular about his craft and it had to be his way. He continued working at CITR and doing interviews regularly, and he wouldn't interview just musicians. He was actually mostly known in the 90s for his unique interviews with public figures. He would do what is called a guerrilla interview at a press conference, where he would go undercover pretending to be a normal interviewer. Then he would ask oddball questions, like in 1993 when he asked Mikhail Gorbachev, former leader of the Soviet Union, which world leader has the biggest pants.
The reporter from UBC's CITR radio who was wearing a toque threw an oddball question at Gorbachev.
Can I ask something? And I was also wondering, of all the political figures that Dr. Gorbachev has encountered, who has the largest pants?
Thank you very much. We'd like to call up now the
Surge Nate Rockin'.
He was actually pretty notorious for this, to the point where security would look out for him, particularly at events. He put a ton of work into his interviews, staking out places for hours, chasing people down for an interview, being kicked out of events, and constantly being shot down. For example, in 1999, he interviewed James Brown, but it wasn't that simple. Nardwuar brought a friend who was a huge fan of James and brought a bunch of rare James Brown memorabilia. At first, James Brown's security told Nardwuar that he couldn't interview him, but Nardwuar gave him the memorabilia and said they were very serious, which eventually led to him getting the interview. James Brown actually found Nardwuar funny, so he accepted the interview, but unlike James Brown, not everyone has taken so kindly to his enthusiastic interviews. For example, in his 2003 interview with Blur, he was bullied by the band's drummer, who claims the only reason he was acting that way was because he was on coke. Shortly after his James Brown interview, Nardwuar got onto Much Music, a Canadian television station, and it opened many doors for him. For a little bit of reference, some people compare Much Music to America's MTV.
Nardwuar the human serviette. Doesn't sound like a normal name for a journalist, but then Nardwuar is no normal journalist. The Vancouver Voice is a legend of campus radio, a Much Music regular, and the lead singer of the Evaporators.
In 2000, Nardwuar interviewed Snoop Dogg, which is an important interview and one of his first ever rap interviews. Nardwuar says what he loves about rap music and rappers is their appreciation for history, especially in a lot of their samples. A lot of his gifts to rappers are records that they have sampled in their music. His reception from the rap community seems to have been a lot warmer than the rock community, and Nardwuar explains why he thinks that is in his interview with Canada Land.
So the publicist would say to them, hey, you got an interview with this guy coming up. He's crazy, he's wacky, he's going to be mean, be wary. So they would be really on guard. Now imagine telling that same thing to like a rapper. Hey, the guy coming up, he's really scary. You have to be on guard. A lot of times the rappers are like, are you kidding? That wimp is going to be scary. So they realize that it's all like a sham anyways. I'm just having fun. So that's why a lot of the interviews have gone better, because when people kind of see me, they're like, the hell is this guy? Whereas other times, a lot of rock and rollers are just believing the publicist.
Throughout the 2000s, Nardwuar would continue his interviews, and he released his first ever video to YouTube in 2006, almost 20 years after starting his radio show. That interview was a Dan Quayle interview, who used to be the vice president under George H.W. Bush. Nardwuar says at the time he wasn't sure if it even hit 20 views. But Nardwuar continued with CITR in his YouTube channel, uploading tons of different interviews with many different artists and genres, but something changed after his 2008 NERD interview. He was pretty well known in Canada, but this interview is what opened up the rap world and honestly the rest of the world to Nardwuar, and it's also what scored him the Jay-Z interview. A lot of artists, especially in the hip-hop community, have grown up watching Nardwuar's interviews. Many artists view it as a sign that they have made it. For example, Jack Harlow said he had grown up on Nardwuar interviews and he's been wanting one for a long time. But despite how loved he is by the newer generation, he still faces hardship. He has a lot of issues with management. For example, he DM'd Billie Eilish for an interview and she was totally down since she also grew up on Nardwuar interviews, but he still had to go through her management, and he still faces those issues with artists like Snoop Dogg and Kendrick Lamar, even though he's interviewed both of them before. Even after all the years and all the success, still not everyone is a fan of Nardwuar. But what makes his interviews so special? Why do people either love or hate Nardwuar? Well, he has a ton of factors that in my opinion make his interviews so fun, unique, and entertaining. For example, his signature doo-doo-doo-doo comes from hockey game melodies because he didn't want an awkward and abrupt ending to his interviews, so he came up with a cool, unique way to sign off. His ba-boom comes from his Harvey Sid Fisher interview, where Harvey would tell jokes and Nard would go, ba-boom. The verses in all of his interview titles comes from back in the day when he was making tapes because they didn't have handy MP4s, and when he was writing the labels, it was shorter to write verses than interviews. His Keep on Rockin' in the Free World is a reference to the Neil Young song Rockin' in the Free World. Neil Young is still Nardwuar's dream interview to this day, as it has been for decades. When he's not giving gifts, sometimes he'll bring records as demonstrations for the artist to talk about, and he says the reason that he does this is because back when he worked at CITR, he would do interviews in the CITR record library, and he would take out the records and ask the artist for their opinion on it. Of course, there was the whole controversy of whether or not he takes back his gifts. Like he said, he gives gifts when he says it's a gift, but sometimes he'll show records so that the artist can comment on it. Another super unique factor is his crazy enthusiasm. When asked if he was playing a character or if it was an act, he responded, "I love information, I love stories." So it's pretty obvious that he really cares about what he's doing and he's super passionate about it. Other friends and family of Nardwuar will tell you that he's not playing a character, but it's just kind of an exaggerated version of himself. And probably everyone's favorite part about Nardwuar interviews is his crazy research. As many of us know, artists have had super entertaining reactions to the information he brings up. Many people wonder how he gets all this information, but I'm personally theorizing that he just does a lot of thorough research, and he probably also just asks people that are close to the people he interviews. The final thing I want to touch on is Nardwuar's crazy work ethic. Every time Nardwuar has been interviewed, he always talks about a few things about his craft, and he also covers it in his TED Talk, so I just want to briefly mention those things. First of all, he says if he's not scared, he's not doing it right. He says he thinks he should always be more scared and nervous about how little he knows because it'll make him want to know more. He's also pushing himself out of his comfort zone. The second thing is that he knows he's going to embarrass himself, but he embraces it. He's constantly said that if you're in the media, you're going to get embarrassed, and he knows that, so he takes it head on. And it's pretty obvious because he's been embarrassed a lot of times. The third thing he says is that the minute you think you know something, you should quit. He says he's still learning every day, and he's always learning something new, and that if he knew everything, there would be no point in doing what he's doing. It's super cool that Nardwuar just wants to keep learning more about music and about the artists that he interviews, and he's extremely passionate about it, and it really shines through. And the fourth and final thing that he says is that his purpose is to inspire people. He always says all the time in his interviews, and he even did a whole TED Talk on it, if he can do it, you can too. It's super inspiring, and it's really true because he put in so much work over the years, and it's very obvious. Just from researching for this video, I've seen so many instances in which Nardwuar was shot down, or he was bullied, or he was hated on, and no one took him seriously or respected him. And after over 30 years of hard work and interviewing people, he's finally at a place where he's pretty respected. Nardwuar's career is extremely inspiring, and the more you look into it, you can see just how hard he persisted and worked. Despite all the hate that he received, he continued to persevere. His character is so friendly and funny, and his interviews are so extremely unique and impressive, it's hard to believe that anyone wouldn't like him. Nardwuar, if you're watching this, we all love you. Keep on rocking in the free world, and